streaming. Yes. Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is July 15th. It is Sunday, and we do a live stream every evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the YouTube channel. And tonight's episode is a recent study came out that showed that the United States was rated the most favorable country for ICOs. We're going to talk about that. And we have news of another crypto bank set to launch. So tonight will be mostly on the cryptocurrencies, but let's take a look at the markets. The gold and silver markets have opened again, and they're flat. Gold at $1241.60, pretty much unchanged. And silver at $1578, also unchanged. Gold and silver enter the weeks under the $1250 mark for gold and under the $16 mark for silver. Cryptocurrencies went up today and they went down today, but so far for the 24-hour period they seem to be up. Bitcoin at 63.64, Ethereum just a bit under 450, Bitcoin Cash 723, EOS 739, and Litecoin about 78.65. News of the day: Donald Trump talking about the EU. Now you remember when he was at a rally in, I forgot where it was, whether it was Tennessee or North Dakota, but he said at the rally that the purpose of the EU was set up to take advantage of the United States. And we heard Juncker's sidekick, I forgot his name, but he was saying the other day that the purpose of the EU was set up because Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard. I don't think either of those versions of history are correct, but it shows you where Trump's mind is. It shows you now where the EU mind is, or at least those that are sober in the EU. Trump today said in a CBS interview, who is your biggest competitor, your biggest global foe right now? And he said, I think we have a lot of foes. I think the European Union is a foe. What they do to us in trade. Now, you wouldn't think of the European Union, but they're a foe. Now, this does reflect a stepping up of the concept of America First. It's talking about NATO having to pay. It's not go along to get along with Europe, that Europe is, in many respects, a competitor. Europe has been relying on the United States for favorable trade deals, according to Trump, and also for favorable defense arrangements, and Trump is basically saying that's going to end. He also called Russia a foe, and he said China's a foe economically. Certainly they're a foe, but that doesn't mean they are bad. Doesn't mean anything. It means they are competitive. They want to do well, and we want to do well. So it's interesting how Trump has really brought the concept of business to the White House. I don't think we've seen that, never in my lifetime. He's looking at everything as a negotiation. I think he got the Chinese to settle one of their, I think it was the phone company ITE, for a few $100 billion. He's looking to make money off of trade and to help the United States. I think, no one's done the study on this, but remember the United States, well, you wouldn't remember, no one would remember, but before the income tax of 1913, the federal government was funded by tariffs. So tariffs were set up not necessarily to be protective, but just as a way also of charging a company who wanted to avail itself of the U.S. markets. And before 1913, that's how the federal government was funded. Right now, because the United States is not only a debtor nation, which means they fund the country by borrowing, but they're also having a trade deficit, so the monies that they make on tariffs are abysmal. And if that switches around, I doubt it will though, but if the United States becomes again a exporting nation or net exporting nation, and it can charge tariffs on the imports, that would be one way to reduce the deficit if possible. I think you'd have to get into a real large number there. You'd have to put tariffs, and maybe he will. He says he's going to put tariffs on $500 billion worth of Chinese goods. Now, I haven't done the numbers, but it could be significant. It's not going to make up for the amount of borrowing the United States has to do, but it could make somewhat of a dent in the deficit. All right, well, let's get a look at the stories of the day. I'm going to cover the crypto bank first. Remember the other night we did a story on the Litecoin Foundation and TokenPay buying a small bank in Germany, 9.9%, because anything over that they need to have regulatory approval. But they're looking to take over that bank and get up to 70 to 90% of that bank. Litecoin will hold about 10% of it just for consulting services, and TokenPay will really be the owner of that bank. And their idea there is to do debit cards with Litecoin and other cryptocurrencies. And someone astutely asked, I think it was DNA, he was saying, one of the commentators on our live streams almost every night, but what happens, will they give them access to the SWIFT system? And the reason that the TokenPay and Litecoin wanted in on a bank was so that they would have full access to all the general banking services, because as you've seen in India has said to crypto companies, you can't access the banking system. So the idea is, well, we'll own a bank. Isn't that clever? We'll see if the regulators allow them to operate the system. Now, the issue in India was you have to be fair to everyone in their ability to access the banking system. The Supreme Court in India hasn't quite ruled on that yet, but so far they're saying maybe they don't. I think the European Union might be a little more lenient and may allow them to do this. I think that, as I did a YouTube and a blog post a while back saying that the bankers think that Bitcoin is a dirty business, but they want a piece of it. And I think that there's a lot of lobbying going on to allow the cryptocurrencies. They want to make sure it doesn't compete with them. The banks want to make sure of that, and they want to make sure they get a piece of it. They don't want this situation where it's outside of their control, a separate ecosystem where they then have to chase it down and try to get it shut down. It's probably too late to do that. So I think they're trying to bring pieces of it into the banking system. I mean, the debit card is classic because that is a banker tool. That is not what cryptocurrencies are about. But I think you're going to see cryptocurrencies integrated in the banking system and cryptocurrencies outside the banking system as well. And you're going to see legal trading with probably Fidelity and Coinbase, and you're also going to see illegal trading. And I think that the regulatory mindset will be to go after the bad actors and then to regulate what they call the good actors, the mainstream institutional investors and so on. Now, what happened with the next bank to come along, this one's bigger than the Litecoin TokenPay. This one is called, what is it called? Founders Bank. Now, this one's significant because I ran across this guy named Joseph Muscat. Never heard of him probably, but he is the Prime Minister of Malta. Now, Malta is a European country. Europe is in the EU. And Joseph Muscat is the Prime Minister. And he had a tweet here: we aim to be the global trailblazers in the regulation of blockchain businesses and the jurisdiction of quality and choice for world-class fintech companies. So it is an official government policy of Malta to welcome blockchain-based businesses. And Binance, which is one of the largest Bitcoin exchanges, wants to be in on this, and they're going to take a 5% stake along with other investors in this $150 million bank called Founders Bank. Also, I believe I read that the Maltese government will also take a stake in the bank. Now, I would imagine, not that Malta can throw its weight around, it's probably the smallest country in Europe, but I don't think they're going to deny Malta its ability to invest in a bank and to have that bank given the full access to the SWIFT system and all the other benefits, so to speak, of a centralized bank. This is, I think if this came out 6 months ago, this would have been a huge deal. The crypto bubble would have grown even bigger. Right now what's happening is because the cryptocurrencies have been plummeting, this type of news gets buried and it's not a big deal because people are more rational. They say, well, let's wait and see what happens with this bank, with Malta. Let's see what happens with Binance. Let's see what happens with Litecoin Foundation and their German bank with Token Pay. And that's rational. But one of the things that does strike me is I remember in 2013 when I first looked at Bitcoin, because just before it started to take off, I'd been hounded by so many people. I think on the Daily Paul was where there was a lot of Bitcoiners. And they were trying to send it to me, and they were telling me it's the future. And I looked at it, and as I mentioned to you guys before, I saw what it was, and I said, that's nice, but it's missing one thing. There's no backing value. It all works. It sounds like it works, but how do you convince people that you're transferring value when you do this? And then the price went up, and when the price fell, I thought, well, that should be the end of it, because obviously people are looking at this thing and saying, what's the big deal? And what got me to realize that I had to put aside my personal distaste or lack of interest in Bitcoin is when it came back in 2016, 2017, the price, that was a result of the people involved in Bitcoin. Even when the price fell back down to $200, $180, whatever it was in 2013, 14, these people all around the world continued to work on all these different Bitcoin projects, Lightning Network, segregated witness, exchanges. And that told me something, that the human capital and innovation that goes into it adds value to the whole ecosystem. And because people actually believe it has value. Now, what's happened this year, these bank deals show me the same thing, but I'm more aware of it. That doesn't matter that the price went down, people are still pouring money and resources into the space. I mean, they're making a move on banks to try to get into the banking system, and I would imagine the banks are making a move to get in on the crypto space. Now, that doesn't mean all banks are trying to get into crypto and everyone's rushing into crypto, the same nonsense you hear, people are going to rush into the metals. I don't mean that. What I mean is there's significant interest by some investors, not the world, not 50% of the people, but there's significant investment interest in the crypto space, just as there's interest in the gold and silver space. But when you talk to a gold or silver or a crypto or Bitcoin person, they make it sound like the whole world is interested in gold. The whole world is going to be on Bitcoin. It's not, and it doesn't have to be for the price to go higher. But I digress because I'm always looking at things, trying to look at them rational, not from the pumper perspective. But I do think that the crypto space moving into banking is a significant development. Now, whether it pans out or not, I don't know. But the reason it's interesting is they haven't thrown their hands up in the air and said, well, this thing's gone into a bubble, it's collapsed, we're not going to bother with it anymore. They're actually continuing to work on these types of projects. All right, let's get to another point that a lot of people keep saying they're going to clamp down on Bitcoin, they're going to shut it down. And they're saying that about the United States. And I don't know if they've been following what the SEC's been doing or what the CFTC's been doing, but there's nothing in the official statements that say anything about banning or cutting it down. And let me explain. First of all, if you say it's a Ponzi scheme, and I'm not even going to comment whether it is or not, I already did a video on that. But the CFTC wouldn't be sanctioning futures on a Ponzi scheme. That would be illegal for them to do that. So that's clearly an indication that they don't think Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme. And even if they do, they've made it legal. And why did they make it legal? They want to control it. There's money to be made on controlling it. There's more money to be made on Bitcoin controlling it than there is on trying to crash it and get it out of the way, because that doesn't clear the way for them to make any more money. It just eliminates a competitor. But the amount of resources you have to expend trying to eliminate that competitor doesn't make any sense. You can integrate it and make even more money. Now, as to the SEC, a lot of people look at when the SEC shuts down an ICO that they're anti-ICO, that they're anti-Bitcoin. No, they're not. What I've heard, I've read and seen TV version or YouTubes of the people that run the SEC talking about it. What they're saying is they don't want fraud in cryptocurrencies. Now, most people, oh, but all cryptos are fraudulent. That's not true. That's like saying all IPOs are fraudulent. Now, you may think the concept of digital money or digital tokens is fraudulent, but that's just your own preference. You don't like things that are digital. That doesn't make a CD or a movie that you download fraudulent because it's digital. It just means it's digital and you don't like that and you'd rather have the CD or the VHS or whatever it is. But what the SEC has been saying, and very consistently, is they'll shut down an ICO because they deem what that company is doing or what that DAO is doing is issuing a security and they're not registering it, or they're not properly selling to the right people, or they're not properly disclosing what this thing is. I've heard many occasions what the SEC has said, that they want people, because they think it's an innovative form of financing, to bring their ICOs to the SEC and have them registered just like they do with companies. Now, I only had a few minutes before I got online tonight, and I couldn't find those stories or those videos. However, I did find very easily on sec.gov, that is the United States Securities and Exchange Commission website. Big page, initial coin offerings, ICOs, and I will read from it to further illustrate the point that they are not looking to shut down cryptocurrencies. Far from it. Companies and individuals are increasingly considering initial coin offerings as a way to raise capital or participate in investment opportunities. While these digital assets and technologies behind them may present a new and efficient means for carrying out financial transactions, they also bring increased risk of fraud and manipulation because these markets, for these assets, are less regulated than traditional capital markets. That's why we are providing this information, the 3 R's of ICOs: risk, rewards, and responsibilities. What they're saying is they want a greater oversight over ICOs. And yes, they will shut down fraudulent ICOs, ICOs that don't register, ICOs that make misstatements. And to show you how receptive they are, there is a company called the Praetorian Group, which has filed with the SEC the same type of registration statement, the S1, with the SEC, to have the SEC review its disclosures so that it can do an ICO. Now, they're going to issue these PAX coins, and I haven't read through it, but it looks just like a normal registration statement, and the SEC wants people to do this. They want people to get the protection of SEC oversight over ICOs. They don't want them out there, just people handing out white papers, and then kids on YouTube sitting there and say, this coin's going to the moon, and getting paid to pump coins. They want this thing to be underneath the umbrella of the SEC, if indeed the ICO can be deemed under the Howey test a security. Now, Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum are probably not securities anyway, so that's why they're not bothering with those, and that'll be up to this, in the way the regulatory scheme, the CFTC, to take care of, because they view those more as commodities. And I know it sounds strange how you can say Bitcoin is a commodity, but that's what they've come up with. Now, also, this study showed that the U.S. was, according to these analysts that are going to go to this crypto finance conference, they think that the U.S. is the most favorable country for the ICOs. The reason for that is people are focusing on when the SEC clamps down, but that's what regulation looks like. You allow good ones, or ones that are they don't judge whether they're good or not. They judge whether or not the company or the ICO has presented information in order for the investors to make a decent decision about it. Now, the SEC doesn't approve or disapprove of securities. They put that straight out on the thing, on the registration statement. But in a sense, they do approve them in the sense that they allow the registration statement to go effective. That's their own wiggle room to say, look, we didn't approve this. All we did was we tried to make sure that the issuer put in all material information, didn't omit material facts, so that you can understand what you're buying. So the fact that they allow it to go effective is their sense. People use the word loosely approve. It's actually, I think it's a crime to say that the SEC has approved of your registration statement. So you have to be very careful not to say that. What you can say is that the registration statement has become effective, and the registration statement becomes effective once you go through the process and you take comments. Here's what it says. Yep, it is a criminal offense. Neither the Securities Exchange Commission nor any state securities commission has approved or disapproved of these securities or passed upon the adequacy or accuracy of this prospectus. Any representation to the contrary is a criminal offense. The reason that's a criminal offense is they don't want people saying, well, the SEC said it was okay. No. What the purpose of it declaring it registration statement effective, and now you're allowed under the SEC to sell your token or your security, is that the SEC has looked at this. They haven't blessed it. But having been involved in these, it seems like they're blessing, because you can't go public until they've signed off on all of the disclosures. But again, you cannot make a representation that the SEC has approved or disapproved. It's interesting that everything is adequate, but investors realize that if you've gone through the registration process, there's some vetting and some endeavor on behalf of both the company and the Securities Exchange Commission to try to make sure that the information in there is correct, complete, accurate, and there's also liability for the company and its officers and directors if there is a material misstatement of material fact, or there's an omission in there they should have told you about that's material. So the point is that the ICOs appear to be, according to the SEC, are going to move into the same realm of basic stocks and companies that are go to the SEC to get registered and go into the public market. So when they call it initial coin offering, and we have initial public offering, the thing about that's a stock offering, initial public offering. Basically, the initial coin offerings will be initial public coin offerings. They should stop calling them ICOs and calling them initial public IPCOs. And I think that's where we're headed. And there's already one in the pipeline. There's a few others. I think, what is that company? I think Gab is doing a public offering as well in a token. Yes, they definitely are. They have a registration statement pending too. So now what's going to happen is the SEC is going to try to make sure they get as many companies to come forward. Otherwise, if they don't come forward, they're going to say, well, you're issuing a security and you haven't come to us and you haven't gotten an exemption to come to us. We're going to bring action against you. They've already done that, and they'll continue to do that. But that action will have more and more companies decide, doesn't make any sense to get in trouble. Let's bring our ICO, or now our IPCO, to the SEC and see if we can do a public offering, or let's just offer it to qualified investors and try to get an exemption from the SEC, rather than just issuing a white paper and finding some YouTube dummies to start touting and pumping it. That's not good for anybody. That's not, well, other than the people who take the money to pump it and the people who sell the coins in that. All right, so that's where we are with the cryptocurrencies. I think that if they continue to work on this stuff, at some point, just like last time, they were in the wilderness for 2 or 3 years, they continue to work. And then there's some spark. Someone gets interested, and then boom, the price goes higher. But I think every time the price goes higher, it's just people chasing the price, not understanding what they're buying, and then selling it because they realized, I didn't know what I bought, and I bought it because it went higher, and now it went down, so why do I want it? So I will continue to follow this, and but I'm not. thinking that the United States SEC or CFTC are going to shut it down. They're going to shut down bad actors. They're going to shut down bad offerings. They're going to shut down people who do money laundering. That's the whole point of them trying to get everything into the banking system, because that's where you know your customer rules are. If you trade on a platform that's fully compliant with the SEC, then there's no real issue. But if you're doing things, the things they don't like are the things they can control, and the things that can involve money laundering, off-chain, privacy coins. Those are the types of things that they're gonna go after. But an ICO in general, and people lump cryptocurrencies all into one pile, it's kind of ridiculous, because an ICO could be basically just a token instead of issuing a stock certificate, and there's nothing fraudulent about that. It's just the format in which they give you, and you can make a perfectly legitimate, non-fraudulent company that's based on issuing tokens instead of stock certificates. I don't know why people think that's the same thing as what was that one, BitConnect or whatever. It's totally different. They're all different. And when they say all cryptos are going to go to zero, I'm sorry, that's ignorance. That a lot of cryptos will go to zero, but when you say all, that means you don't know what all of them are, because not all of them are based on fraud or pie in the sky. Because, like I say, you can have a totally legitimate business that issues tokens. Why would that have to go to zero? I mean, you have companies in the market that don't make any money and their stocks go higher. All right, let's take a look. I have not been following the comments. Let's see if there are any comments. Oh, we got a lot of comments, and I see Gus the Broken is here from the Netherlands. Sunday night. He is up late. I'll put links to these SEC things when I put the blog post up. By the way, on the blog post, I do post these YouTubes, these live streams daily on the blog, so that you can go there and you can check them out there as well. And I do put the, like I put charts or some backup information for what we talked about. All right, let's see what we got here. Gus, you know, when you post music and YouTubes, they don't show up, so it's not really worth doing it, because no one can click on them, and it's just anyway. Things are getting really weird on YouTube, just expressing one's opinions, no matter the subject. Regulators, not only in the currency, my friend. Okay. Pad. Malta is one of the home of the ancient giants. Full of history. Yeah. The Knights of Malta, formerly Knights of Rhodes. Rhodes, I think that's Greece. I've been to both. Rhodes. All right. Lots of talk on Malta. You guys can read that. The CFTC is about... That's right. And if the CFTC is the... When you think about it, Pad, who makes money on IPOs? Investment bankers, accountants, lawyers, and Silicon Valley. The way that works is Silicon Valley sits around and they have people come up with ideas on how to digitize, I don't know, something. And then the venture capital puts money into it. And now the venture capitalist puts in $10 million. And they're looking to get an exit strategy and make like $100 million or $200 million. So they pump the company along. Then they bring it to the Wall Street. And they say, hey, how about we go public with this? And, oh, yeah, we can do that. And then they show them the financials. They say, oh, yeah, well, whatever, Snapchat or whatever it is. And then they go public. And then that $10 million that the Silicon Valley put in becomes $150 million. Then they dump it on the public, and the public bids it up because they think Wall Street's approved this thing. And the way they go public is lawyers and accountants put together the registration statement that I was just talking about for that ICO. And the lawyers and bankers may make $1 million, $500,000. I mean, the lawyers and the accountants may make in fees just putting that thing together. The bankers will make some money, some fees. And the SEC, you have to pay them a registration fee, and that could be a few $100,000. So of course they want ICOs. Why do they want to push that away? If they can bring them into the pipeline, it's just twice the amount of money that they would make from, they'd still make IPOs, and then they do ICOs. And if ICOs ever bigger than IPOs, what do they care? They got the pipeline, they got the SEC, they got the lawyers, they got the accountants. Yep, it's all about making money. And that's why it's foolish to think they're going to shut it down. Why would they shut down a money-making machine that's right in front of their faces? They regulate it. And then what they do is they go after the ones who are not in the tent. The ones that are doing things off-chain, outside of the SEC, outside of the whole ICO process. And they use the money they make to go after those. And they try to bring everything under the tent, into debit cards, into having your... Fidelity's already talked about this. Fidelity has already integrated its dashboard with Coinbase. You can take your Coinbase account and slap it into your Fidelity dashboard. Because Fidelity wants trading fees. Schwab wants trading fees. People trade these cryptocurrencies left and right, and that's trading fees they're not getting. Why do they want to ban that? It's like someone created that for them. Now they're going to take it. Yeah, and that's right, Pat. The ICOs fail. And the reason they fail is because they are fraudulent. But that doesn't mean an ICO by its nature is fraudulent. It just means if you have no regulation, and I can come up with a sheet of paper and write a bunch of stuff on a white paper, and then go on YouTube and say, hey, promote this for me, it's going to the moon. Yeah, you're going to pick up some money, and then there's nothing there. That's the whole end. It's gone. No, they're not, Pat. They're not going to come up with government ICOs. We've never had government IPOs. What they're going to have, well, let's step back. Let's use the terminology, Pat. Facebook, you could say, is a government IPO. Okay. If you're going to use it that way, or Twitter, there are a lot of these companies that come to market, and they're backed by Silicon Valley, which means there's some institutional establishment angle to them, and there's some benefit why they want those companies to be out there and to do well, even if they don't make any money. Amazon makes, most of its money from selling cloud computing to the CIA. So, but they're not going to do government ICOs. What they're going to do is they're going to find companies. Silicon Valley is going to find them. They're going to bring them through the ICO process just like they do the IPO process. Yes, I don't think that just because something's been registered with the SEC, it makes it safer. I mean, think about it. That statement about the criminal offense, they didn't approve Tesla. They allowed Tesla to go public because Tesla met the requirements of registration. That's all. So they're not responsible for people buying Tesla. The SEC's view is, in my opinion, we'll look at the stuff. We'll make sure that they disclose it. And if you want to buy it, and you want to buy it with full disclosure, who are we to tell you what to buy? And that makes sense. They're the umpire. They're the referee. They're not there to pump a stock or to tell you don't buy it. And that's why they have that criminal liability right on the thing there. All right. Isn't mining Bitcoin very expensive these days? I think it's about the price of where it is right now. All right. A noise. This is a new guy. A voice and D3. What do you think about the... I just laugh at that stuff. What do I think about the idea that gold is being pegged to the you mean SDR? I know Rickard's a big proponent of this. Yeah, he likes to hear himself talk. Some of his claims in the past have been more theater and less substance. Bingo star. Yeah, SDR. SDR, I hate even having to address it. It's because he says something, and then every channel repeats it. I've already gone through this. The SDR cannot be... He had an article in June of 2017 in Zero Heads that said, come January... President Trump is in for a shock because fact, the IMF wants to institute a global currency called the SDR, and they're going to do it. China's on board with it. They can't do it. The United States controls the voting at the IMF. Not all countries even want the SDR to be a global currency. It makes no sense, but that's the promotion. And then, of course, he throws in there, oh, well, it's going to be a gold component because no one will do it unless it has gold in it and gold 10,000 and buy this book. I mean, Fed can never raise rates. Next move they're going to make, it's going down. I don't know. I mean, you can listen to what you want, but I don't know what the big attraction to the SDR is. I get the concept. The idea is that the SDR isn't backed by anything. You can just create them. He says that the only clean balance sheet in the world will be the IMF. But that's just made up fiction, because then they're just going to issue more SDRs because they can just invent them out of thin air, because you don't need to back them by the currencies that are supposedly in the basket. So you just print them up. I don't know how that creates any liquidity. You might as well just print more dollars, more yen, more yuan, and more pounds, and more euro. I mean, why would you have the SDR be printed up? I mean, it's possible, but there's no indication. There's no talk about it. It just keeps getting promoted as something like, I don't know, the SDR has been around since 1969. All right, yes, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Facebook. Well, there you go. So if that's what you mean by government, yeah, that's what they'll do. They'll favor certain ICOs. They'll get the backing. If you remember during the what was it, the .com boom, there were certain companies, most of them were nonsense. They were just like .com, whatever it was, paper.com, whatever it was. But the ones that did really well were the ones that got the Wall Street backing and the Wall Street analysts. Remember Mary Meeker and the guy who runs Business Insider today? What's his name? He got in trouble for it. I forgot his name, but he was an analyst, and they would say, "Oh, this company," and they'd write these glowing reports. There was supposedly a Chinese wall between the research part of the bank and the bank that was selling the securities. The idea was that the company would get in good favor. They'd get assigned an analyst, and then they would put out strong buy. I remember that everything was a strong buy. There was never a company they would put out that wasn't a strong buy. And then to be really funny, then there was strong buy, hold, neutral. There was never sell. Everything was a version of buy. All right. Now this gold, you see, the gold mimic all right. Ever since China's become part of the SDR. All right, well, that's about it for tonight. I want to thank everyone for joining me, and please join me every night. I have looked at it, Pat, and you can do the same with a lot of currencies. If you know what anyway, it doesn't mean anything. There's always these correlations that people make a big deal out of them. Anybody remember the ratings of the cut U.S. debt? No, nobody remembers that anymore. But they did cut it. They did indeed cut the U.S. debt, and got a lot of trouble for that. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me, and join me again tomorrow night for another discussion. And I'm going to have out the Kazakhstan numbers, I hope, tomorrow. Oh, and for Moronica, I didn't get it out yet, and I'm going to do a double one next week. So I'm just saving the information. And the weekend, in case you missed it, top gold, silver, and crypto stories, I haven't done yet. I'll get to that tomorrow morning. There's a lot in that one. And in the meantime, I will be sending out the next round of mugs tomorrow. So if you want to be in that shipment, you can order your mug now or tonight before, I guess, 10 o'clock in the morning is when I'll head over to the post office. And let me give you that link there. You just go to the Smaulgld homepage. You can order either the classic or the super classic Smaulgld mug, and you'll get that in a few days, because I will deliver that tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks, Gus. Thanks, Pad, Voice, and everyone else who joined this evening.